Bills Mafia. We know there's only one topic every day, all Bills all the time. And now Matt Beauvais and Sal Capaccio are going really deep, talking Bills all year long, because it's always game day in Buffalo.
All right, one more to go. One more preseason game, and then it is off to the regular season. Welcome back to It's Always Game Day in Buffalo. Sal Capaccio, Matt Beauvais, glad to have you aboard out at practice today. And Matt, sometimes you get those days this time of year where you're reminded fall is just around the corner. A little bit chillier, a little rainy. It felt like it was the middle of the season type of practice. I wasn't quite ready for
Am
it.
I a sicko that I love this weather? I think I love like 60 degrees, a little bit of overcast, and a little bit of breeze. I know that I don't want that all the time, but I'm not a big heat guy. Like, I love fall weather. I would have preferred it to not be raining. I would prefer like just a very dry. I think if you said like, what is your ideal day? Matt Beauvais says 63 degrees with a light breeze and sunny. That is my ideal day.
I don't think you're sicko for that. What I think you're a sicko for is wanting that on August 23rd. That's what I think you're a sicko for. I don't need that on August 23rd.
I like it if we have to work in it for a lot of reasons. I like that it's very comfortable outside. I also like that the video looks better in darker situations, because then you don't have to worry about the lighting as much. The sun can make it impossible to shoot football, especially inside the stadium, because sometimes the play is in the sun. Sometimes it's out of the sun. Sometimes it's coming from one side, but it's inconsistent. So on an overcast day, I think the video pops that much more.
We will talk about all the things you shot at practice, and saw, and we saw, and everything that went on at practice. But first, before we do that, man, another tough week for you and your family, and I'm so sorry. And I'll let you tell everybody about why you're absent from the last program.
Yeah, so Sal did the last program solo because my grandfather, we found out very suddenly, had an inoperable brain bleed. 95 years old, was unbelievably healthy, lived a very, very full life. Well, once they determined he had an inoperable brain bleed, they switched to end-of-life care, palliative care, and within 24 hours of that, he passed away. 6 weeks to the day of when my father passed away. So I think there's something there. I think he died of a broken heart. I don't know the medical terminology for that, if it's even possible, but we had my daughter's baptism about a week and a half ago. And after the baptism, we stopped at the mausoleum where my father is buried. And it was the first time my grandfather has been there since like the cemetery and all of the stuff. And to see him sit there and break down, seeing his son buried somewhere, was so incredibly difficult. And I think it quite literally, like, you don't want to say it killed him, but like, it makes you wonder, like, could he take the pain anymore? I cannot imagine anybody who has ever had to bury a child. My grandfather had to do it twice, with my father and with a sister who died at 3 months old, never came home from the hospital. So he lived a very full life. He was a teacher at Iroquois. He helped run the Boys and Girls Club at East Aurora, lived there his entire life. So it's a little different when somebody's 95 years old. It will never be easy. It will never be a good time to lose somebody. But man, 95 years. God bless him. He was an incredible man, very gentle, very kind. He'll be missed, but I do find some comfort in knowing he's with Dad again.
Yeah, I think for me, like, you tell me that story and I'm thinking there's a spot where he wanted to be with his son, right? And it didn't have to go like that, but he wanted to be with his son again, and he's going to be with his son. And he immediately, got with his son again. They're going to be forever, eternally together. And he also lived an amazing life. The things you tell me about him, he was driving himself around at 95 years old. I think that's incredible. I hope I'm doing that at 95. Man,
he was doing yoga. He went to the gym. He cut his own lawn at 95 years old. Quick story. So we got a call 10 years ago that he had fallen off the roof. He was cleaning his own gutters. So at this point, he's like in his mid 80s.
Yeah.
Go to the hospital. He's in the emergency room. And the doctor asks us in front of my dad and I, what's your level of pain? 1 to 10. And my grandpa goes, I don't know, like a 2, maybe a 3. He goes, sir, you've cracked your femur. You should be in a lot of pain. And he was like, well, okay. whatever. Just when can I get out of here? When can I go home? Like people built in that, like people born and
Yeah,
raised in that generation, they're just built different, man. They're seriously built
no
different.
doubt.
Live to 95. I always thought like the way that he would go would be like snow blowing his own driveway at 105 years old and just like slipping and falling. So I think he died peacefully in the hospital,
Yeah.
surrounded by family, and was only there for a couple days. There is something comforting about that.
What's his name? What was his name?
Richard Anthony Beauvais.
Richard
He
Anthony Beauvais.
Everybody called him Rich. He hated when people called him Dick.
I mean, well, I don't even know how to answer that other than he's 95 and he kicked my butt anyway. So I don't think I want to call him anything that he didn't want to be called.
Hey, a lot of people had different names for him. He was just a really special dude.
Well, prayers and thoughts and love to you and your family once again through a difficult time. And I know it's been very difficult, but I also know you find comfort in the great life that he lived and the fact that he's with his son and the rest of his family once again.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, there's never an easy transition, but we are going to talk about the Buffalo Bills, and let's start doing that now because they have a preseason game on Saturday against the Chicago Bears. Saturday at 1 p.m. It's the preseason finale. Now, there used to be 4 preseason games. There's only 3, but what the NFL did was they chopped off the last preseason game. So you still have 2 weeks from the final preseason game to the first regular season game. And in fact, in the Bills' case, it's Saturday to a Monday. It's 16 days from the final preseason game to the opening night, September 11th, Monday night against the New York Jets. Matthew Beauvais, given how the Bills performed or didn't perform, I guess I'd say, against the Pittsburgh Steelers, especially their starters, would you entertain the thought of the starters playing at all in this game to feel a little better, look a little better, work out some kinks, whatever it is? And full disclosure, we don't know if they are yet. If you're listening to this after you find out, you might know that already because Sean McDermott will probably reveal that on Thursday morning. We are recording this on Wednesday night, which is why I wanted to ask you this now.
I am not a preseason guy. I do not see the point in playing your starters in the preseason. I think the risk greatly outweighs the reward. All of that said, because they looked so bad, not everybody, but most of them looked so bad against the Steelers, I think I would play all of the starters besides like Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, and then maybe some of the other guys who you absolutely know, like you're fine, you're not overly concerned about. Like I'm not playing Matt Milano, I'm not playing Tre'Davious White, I'm not playing guys who have a very defined role on this team. But the areas where I was concerned the most, the offensive line, I would say roll the entire unit out there again. See what they can do. Even your starting tackles. If that means you've got to go Dawkins and Spencer Brown playing in another game, maybe Mitch Morse is the one that you give the game off and you say, okay, Bates, you're going to play center for Morse. We want to get another look at Torrance. McGovern gets banged up a little bit on Wednesday. Probably not going to play him just to be cautious, even though it doesn't seem like it's going to be a long-term thing. Probably not going to risk anything with him, but I thought the offensive line struggled, so I would like to see another look at them. And then defensively, I know the defensive line generated some pressure, and that's maybe been the like lone bright spot for the defense over the last couple weeks, but they didn't look outstanding either, those first couple drives. The Jaylen Warren touchdown just like keeps replaying in your head of like, how does that happen? I know you're not game planning for a preseason game a ton, but you can't let a play like that happen ever. So I think that we will see some starters. I think we'll see more starters than we usually see in the preseason finale, just because I think it could be a little bit of a message to the guys. Like, we need more.
Yeah, but it's Sean McDermott, the Bills as an organization, Brandon Beane and McDermott are never reactionary, right? They don't. I mean, what I mean by that is, sure, if they lose a guy to an injury, they'll react to go out and sign somebody. What I mean is, they generally stick to their plan. They generally have a plan. They stick to it, and they don't say, "Oh, we got a knee jerk." So that's why. I mean, I don't know. Maybe his plan all along was to play the starters, but if his plan wasn't to play the starters, I don't think McDermott's going to change that. I think he'll just do what he feels he needs to do to make sure that they get through the preseason healthy. And he's not going to look at last Saturday and say, you know what, we didn't play well. Now he could surprise us and go, hey, there's 2 weeks left and we didn't like the way we looked. And I gotta make sure that these guys are right and understand how important this is. The one thing I'll counter on with what you said about the O-line, I hear you on everything. What I'd be worried about, though, is you're already so thin right now on the O-line at tackle, especially with McGovern getting banged up, like you said, but especially at tackle.
That's true.
What happens if Spencer Brown rolls an ankle or something? I mean,
Mhm.
I don't think you can risk it.
If that happens, you get Jason Peters on the phone and you say,
Oh,
"Hey, big guy, you want to come
yeah,
back
but
to
I mean,
Buffalo?" I
or you
know,
could just
I
not
know.
let him play.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know. I would say of the position battles, it's not a position battle, but of the offensive line positions, I would say I'm most concerned about right tackle. And I know what you're saying. There's like no depth behind, behind Dawkins and Spencer Brown. It's basically Questenberry, Vandermark, and that's it. So your point is valid, but you could say the same thing because you don't really have a lot of options there. What if you roll out just Questenberry and Vandermark as your two starters, and then one of them gets hurt, and then
Right?
there's like one person
true.
behind them? So
That's true.
I don't know what they do. I don't think they're going to do what I suggested. I think there's probably like 30 players who do not step on the field in the game. That's what I assume the Bills are going to do. But if McDermott is a little bit more reactionary than they normally are, you're not going to see me complaining. But hindsight's a heck of a thing because if they play and then somebody gets injured, you could sit here and say, what the heck were they doing? So it goes both ways. Just there's absolutely no chance that like Diggs or Allen or Milano or Trey White or Gabe
You
Davis
say
or
there's
like,
absolutely no chance they're going to play?
I don't think they should.
Oh, no. Well, there's a difference. You said there's no chance they would. That's what I mean. Like, I don't know yet. I'm still waiting for Sean to tell us. I don't completely dismiss it. I think you're right. I think they won't play, but I mean, look, there are teams playing starters. Aaron Rodgers is playing for the Jets. And again, I'll go back to this is normally the week you play your starters anyway. It's the third preseason game when you have 2 weeks left. So I'm not going to completely dismiss the notion. And like I said, by the time people hear this, they might already know the answer to this question, but I'm fascinated by it.
Evidence tells us the last couple of years they get one game. The
Yep,
big starters,
that's right.
Allen, Diggs, etc. The last couple of years they've happened on home games. So one of them was the middle game, one of them was the last game. I'm not really looking too much into that. I'm just thinking that it was convenient. It was the home game. That's kind of what they felt most comfortable, the most controlled setting. But they've already played. I mean, Allen was 7 of 10. He looked like Josh Allen. He had a big play that was negated by a penalty. There was like a million penalties. I need to see nothing more from Josh Allen to be convinced that he, in particular, is ready to go. I feel the same way about Stephon Diggs, and I feel
Right.
the same way about some of those other guys that I've mentioned.
By the way, I do think, and I don't know this, and maybe I should ask Sean at some point. It wouldn't matter now. It's past it, but I wonder if he used this preseason game, the one at the Steelers, instead of a home game, because week one is at the Jets, and they needed to make sure they go on silent count and that kind of thing, like to the crowd. It wasn't super loud, but you're in a road environment. We got to make sure that we're buttoned up as far as that, but they weren't buttoned up, right? I mean, they had 12 penalties in the first half, and a lot were pre-snap penalties, which is something that is carrying over. And now, even in practice, they're trying everything they can to, correct that before they get to New York, and they have to really have a crowd, a loud environment on Monday night at MetLife. Well, one of the advantages of Saturday and not playing the starters is there's still 90 guys on the roster, which has not been the case this late in the year. Let's talk about some of the ones that are fighting for roster spots. Sal Capaccio, WGR Sports Radio 550, Matt Bove, WKBW TV, Channel 7 Sports Director in Buffalo. All right, so the new rule is starting this year, and ironically, the Bills, along with a bunch of other teams, actually proposed this rule. It wasn't just the Bills. The new rule is there's one cut down deadline in the NFL. Now, you can cut whenever you want for your teams, but you have to be down from 90, go all the way from 90. You can carry 90. The new rule is basically you can carry 90 for 3 preseason games. You never could do that before. Yeah. But then you got to get to 53 by Tuesday at 4 p.m. That's going to be really interesting. Let's take a look at some of the guys that are really fighting either for spots on the roster, or maybe they already kind of have one and they're fighting to cling on to that spot. I'll ask you for one name on offense, then I'll give one. We'll go one name on defense that you want to talk about who's in an interesting spot. So I'll start with you, Matt. What's one name on offense?
I feel like offensively, if you say like an offensive lineman, it's kind of a boring answer because I don't think any of these guys you would want to see on the field a ton. You probably wouldn't feel great about the Bills' chances if these players had to play a lot. But for me, it's Ike Butker. Ike Butker has been a guy who's been versatile for this team in the past, almost like what Ryan Bates has become. Then he has the injuries. We don't really get to see him for a couple of years. I think they liked what he brought to the table a couple of years ago. He was a little bit of stability while there was kind of the injuries that just continued to happen with the offensive line. But we haven't really talked a lot about Ike Butker this summer. And I think 5 months ago, I would have said Ike Butker is going to be on this team. Now, I don't know if that's going to be the case because of just all of the other bodies that they have there. They might like the upside of some of the younger guys that they have, or maybe some of the guys who have a little bit more experience than Ike Butker at different stops around the NFL. So I think for me, it's Ike Butker because I thought it was almost a foregone conclusion that he would be on the team. Now I don't necessarily feel that way.
Well, I looked in last year, they kept 9 offensive linemen. They could keep 10, but they kept 9 last year. They can make 8 active on game day, so then you have 1 still in reserve. But if you go with 9, I do think it's tough with the numbers. Now, we know Tommy Doyle is out for the year. I thought it was interesting that on Wednesday, Ken Dorsey did not rule out somebody possibly moving outside who normally plays inside. Hint, hint, Ryan Bates. I asked him because of Ryan Bates, really specifically.
Yeah.
I'm not telling you he's going to do that. The point is that they'll look at all those options at offensive tackle because the flexibility obviously matters. Ike Butker's more of an interior guy, but because you have Bates that has all that flexibility, you could have a guy like that still on your roster, even with David Edwards, who I think makes it. David Questenberry to me is going to be on the roster, and I think the guy they really like is Ryan Vandermark. Vandermark to me is going to be a backup tackle somewhere, left side, right side swing, whatever it is. I like that pick of Ike Butker. That's really interesting. I'm going to go to the wide receivers. I don't know what's going to happen with Khalil Shakir because
that's a good one.
If you pin me down, I'm saying he's making the team, and the reason is numbers, right? Like, and the reason is I should say it's not even numbers; it's math for him. He hasn't been in the league 4 years. This is only his 2nd year, actually. So if you waive him, you're losing him, Matt. I can't see a scenario where someone doesn't claim him. He's subject to waivers. If you release him, I think someone's claiming him. I'm like, oh my gosh, we'll take Khalil Shakir. Like, he was a 5th round pick, but we had a higher grade on him than that. We just didn't draft him. He was thought to be more of a 3rd or 4th round pick in the draft a couple of years ago by most analysts. The problem is, I don't think he's had a very good camp, or at least inconsistent, I should say. He's had some really good moments. And he's had an inconsistent camp. And Andy Isabella is making a really good push here. And Justin Shorter is a guy like they don't really have that kind of guy like that with his size and can play special teams and be a gunner. And I don't see them keeping 7. I mean, to me, Shakir is kind of a duplicate of Deontay Hardy and Andy Isabella. And this might tie into keeping Isabella. But I think Khalil Shakir is in an interesting spot. And I'll also say that I wouldn't doubt if Brandon Beane was fielding calls or making calls to try and see if he can move somebody who's not going to make the team. And to me, that could be a guy like Shakir.
Yeah, the Shakir one's interesting because I think Justin Shorter locked up a spot against the Steelers. I think the way he played in the second half, he was already a draft pick, so he had that going for him. He could have been honestly pretty okay the entire summer and still made the team because he was a draft pick, because he's an athletic freak and he's huge, and they don't have a lot of wide receivers who have much size. Shakir, unfortunately for his chances at making the team, kind of similar to some of the other guys that they have there. Obviously Diggs and Davis are on the team. Sherfield and Hardy are on the team. And now you get to the other guys and it's like, okay, if you think Shorter's making the team, what do you do with Shakir? I think right now he makes the team, but I do not think it's a slam dunk. I think that they don't want to cut bait yet. I think they want to give it a little bit more time. And honestly, Shakir has gotten some run going back to last year with the top offense at times. He has made plays for them. I bet they're a little bit scared about just cutting bait early and watching him go thrive somewhere else. You could never have cold feet in this situation, but it makes you different skill set, different player, different situation. It makes you think of Isaiah Hodgins, who then leaves and goes and becomes an immediate player with the Giants. Not a star by any stretch, but somebody who can play. Man, you'd think that this team would love to have Isaiah Hodgins still, right?
Oh, yeah, I think so. But look, I mean, they received a lot of flack last year for the Isaiah Hodgins thing, but
no, they can't though.
But yeah, exactly. Isaiah Hodgins had to be a special teams contributor. He wasn't going to play that much, so it was always a tough spot, and he just wasn't very good on special teams, and he couldn't maintain blocks, in kickoff return situations. I know people think those things are, well, what does it matter if he's a really good receiver? I get it, but was he playing over Gabe Davis? No. Was he playing over Stephon Diggs? No. I mean, it was just a tough situation. Shakir here. Okay, so let's play this out. Do you think Andy Isabella makes it?
No, I don't.
Okay, so you have Shakir and Isabella out. You'd have Diggs, Davis,
No, I have
Hardy.
Shakir. I have Shakir in.
I'm sorry about that. Let me
Yeah, you're
rephrase
good.
though. You have Diggs, Davis, Hardy, Sherfield, Shorter, Shakir, right?
Yes.
I don't think Shorter is completely safe. I like what you said about him, and I probably makes it because he is a investment, 5th-round pick. He's a guy that can be a special teams guy, can be a gunner. To me, he's your Jake Kumaro replacement more than anything is what he really is from last year. Speaking of the Isaiah Hodgins situation with special teams, I think it's a really interesting decision. I guess I could see them keeping 7 receivers if they really, felt that they just couldn't lose one. But there is a difference with Isabella. He's been in the league 4 years. If you release Isabella, he probably doesn't. I mean,
Yeah.
he's not subject to waivers. So you can't claim him anyway. He's a free agent. Unless a team comes calling and says, we're going to offer you a contract, which is possible, he probably comes back to the practice squad anyway. Or he could say, I'm not doing that. I want to take my chances, stay out there and be a free agent and hook onto somebody's 53 soon.
Nah, you got a much better chance of getting Isabella to your practice squad than getting Shakir even within the organization. I think if Shakir does not make the 53-man roster, he's probably signed by a different team by 4:15 on Tuesday night. Who knows? Maybe it's the Giants, right? Maybe it's Dable and Joe Shane again.
He'd be claimed by whoever, and then they would award the claim by noon on Wednesday, I think.
So I just don't think that he would go unclaimed. I think Isabella is probably a pretty safe bet to go unclaimed. And I see what you're saying about maybe him wanting to stay out there and be able to answer the phone whenever there's an injury to somebody and try and latch on right to a 53. But I think for him, like, having a paycheck and being in the NFL is probably more valuable than just kind of sitting around and waiting. I mean, it's not like he is a super, super young player. I think he's 26, 27 years old. At this point, like, those guys are grinding to just stay within an organization, make some money, and then potentially get a chance somewhere down the road.
Yeah, and just so everybody knows, if a team does claim a player, whether it's the Bills or anybody else, if a guy, the only players subject to waivers would be guys who haven't been in the league 4 years. So if that happens, a guy gets released, he hasn't been in 4 years. If a team claims him, they have to put him on their 53-man roster for 3 weeks. They cannot just put him on their practice squad. So that's actually a deterrent. So maybe maybe there's a scenario where, a guy like Shakir even passes through because you're like, yeah, we got to give him a spot on the 53. Do we have a spot? We like the guys we have. We'll see. Let's go to the defensive side. Give me one guy on defense that's in an interesting spot.
Kingsley Jonathan.
Yeah,
he's been somebody talked about a lot this week.
Orange.
Yeah, I know. I almost shouldn't have picked it just for that. No, I'm just kidding. He's been a guy who's been talked about this week as somebody who has kind of flashed. I believe Eric Washington specifically called him out. In the games he's played, he has looked good. It's funny that they're playing the Bears this week because when I think of Kingsley Jonathan, I think of him getting on the field on Christmas Eve against the Bears in a regular season game and making an impact. To me, it comes down to, what do you value more? The upside you potentially get with Kingsley Jonathan, or the surefire thing of what Shaq Lawson is, because Shaq Lawson can help kind of bridge the gap to whenever Von Miller is ready to go. Shaq Lawson has played very meaningful snaps for this team and still looks like he can play. I don't know if he can play as much as he did a few years ago, but you have to decide. What do you want? Do you want the safer, pick on your 53-man roster of Shaq Lawson, or do you want the upside of Kingsley Jonathan? And I think right now it's like 55-45 in favor of Jonathan as opposed to Lawson.
I really like your Jonathan pick. I think he could make it. I think Cameron Klein's done enough in a normal situation to make it. I just think the numbers might not work out for him. He's looked really good to me. But I'm going to stay on this side of the ball. I'm on this side in this position group. The guy that's interesting to me is Boogie Basham. To me, he's almost like the Khalil Shakir of the defense, which is he's been here 2 years. So, I mean, that's an investment. That's a 2nd-round pick. You don't want to divest yourself from that and move on. But at the same time, is there enough room for him? I mean, I think they like AJ Epinesa more than him. I think the way it shakes out, it looks like AJ is a guy ahead of him. Maybe it's AJ Epinesa, but look, we're going to get into a Von Miller discussion here. When Von Miller's healthy, whether that's week 1, week 5, week 10, I mean, at some point, you're having Von Miller. If everyone on the defensive line is healthy, and I know injuries happen, they're not keeping 6 of them, Matt. So You're looking at Miller, Rousseau, Floyd as locks, and then you have Basham, Epinesa, Shaq Lawson. What's with him? Cameron Klein, Kendall Vickers, Kingsley Jonathan, all of them have done something. If you like Jonathan, you throw him into that mix. But even without Jonathan, somebody's going to be left without a chair when the music stops.
Yeah, I agree. I think that your Boogie Basham pick to me is like very indicative of what I think will happen with Brandon Beane. Like I think that's the type of player that they trade. Like somebody who you do not feel comfortable cutting bait from because of the asset you used to get them, but maybe you've got a team out there that's willing to give you a 4th round pick, a 5th round pick.
What about a team that was willing to give you a linebacker or a tackle?
Great. Do that. Honestly, if you can make that deal work, like, they always call them in hockey, like a hockey trade where it's a player for a player, a football trade where it's a player for a player, you should absolutely be using a position where you have a little bit of depth and option and try and flip it into something that you desperately need, which right now are those 2 positions, our tackle, offensive tackle, and linebacker. Like, offensive tackle is a little bit more cut and dry. Assuming that they're healthy, we know who the 5 starters are going to be. We are 3 weeks away from the regular season. I still do not know who their starting middle linebacker is. I still don't know who I think it's going to be. I still don't know who I think it should be, which is an issue for a team that has Super Bowl expectations.
Yeah, and they did this with Daryl Johnston a couple of years ago from this same position where
and
they
Cody Ford.
And he was on a rookie deal still.
Wyatt Teller didn't work out that one.
How about Russell Bodine? I mean, Brandon Beane got a draft pick for Russell Bodine,
a 6th round pick
New England
too.
Patriots, right?
Yeah, I think it was like a 6th round pick. I don't even think it was a 7th. I think they got a 6th for him, which is fairly impressive.
Yeah, so they've done this before. I mean, the guy got a draft pick for Lee Smith in the offseason once. All right, so he'll be searching as much as he can to try and make these deals. And I don't want to speak for you. I don't think either of us are trying to push Boogie Basham or Khalil Shakir out of Buffalo. All we're saying is these are good football players. If they can't make your roster, then you have to look to try and maybe get an asset for them. And the Bills already have, they will have 10 draft picks next year. Once the compensatory picks come in, they'll get a 3rd rounder for the Tremaine Edmonds situation. They're going to have 10 draft picks next year. So it doesn't have to be a draft pick. They have done a nice job of stockpiling that. So I think if you can get a player, a guy that can help you, offensive tackle depth, linebacker, the middle linebacker that maybe can push these guys. I mean, heck, if he can start, that's great. I mean, there are salary cap concerns here as well. Speaking of that, before we move on, I want to talk about Von Miller. So Terrell Bernard returned to practice in a very limited, weird kind of way.
Yeah, limited.
Wednesday, right? I'm going to call him limited. I mean, he had his helmet and his shell on like everybody else, but he didn't do any individual work or any team drills against the offense. He did nothing against anybody, but he did line up with the defense when they were doing install. So I think to me, that's kind of limited. He was on the field doing some stuff. So either way, feels like he's getting ready to come back. When he does, do they just go right to him and go, dude, no one else has done this? You let's see if you can step up and be this guy we want you to be.
They might. I mean, I think that speaks volumes to the players that were in front of him, the players that we thought could have taken this competition and ran away with it. But it doesn't feel like Dodson has done anything to say, like, okay, this is my job. And then it feels like Klein is kind of your break glass in case of emergency player that you could probably be okay with for a couple weeks, but you don't want to be your long-term answer there, just given his age and how many, miles are on those tires. So I would say, I don't think they do that if the guy didn't even play a preseason game, but I think the leash could be pretty short on whoever's in front of them. And given the scenario we're talking about, I would think it would be Klein. I would think that Klein is on the field against the Jets and they say like, okay, Terrell, like get ready because if this does not go well, you're going to be out there by week 3, week 4, whatever it is. And then you're going to get your kick at the can. Your kick at the can, though, just happens to come in the regular season and not in the preseason.
16 days they'll have from their final preseason game till they play Monday night. That's actually the same amount of time that they had for training camp. So if Terrell Bernard's healthy enough to start practicing, that day, the day after on that Monday, 2 weeks would be, well enough for him to get put back into the starting lineup. He knows the defense. He's been actually practicing there. He had the injury back on August 10th. Here we are on August 23rd. So it's been a little less than 2 weeks now since he returned. All right. They got to make a decision on Von Miller too. Matt, we kind of touched on this last time you and I talked, but now we're getting a lot closer. We're within a week. Bills have to make a decision, not only on who they're going to keep on their 53-man roster, but in conjunction with that, what they do with guys on reserve lists. Now, Nyheim Hines is already on a reserve NFI list, so he's done for the year. They can't bring him back. That's fine. We don't know how that salary cap situation is going to play out. They're still working on that. But Von Miller's on the active PUP list. There is no reserve PUP list in the preseason or camp. What there is a reserve PUP once regular season starts. They have to make a decision. Do they want to put him there and stash away his roster spot, therefore losing him for 4 weeks? Or do they activate him to the regular 53-man roster, take him off PUP, and say, he's ready to go. Let's do this. He counts on the 53. I ask you this with the knowledge that on Tuesday and Wednesday, he showed up to practice on Tuesday with his padded pants on, even though he didn't practice, and on Wednesday with his padded pants and his helmet on. I asked him when I saw him walking through the field house, you just get in the field with the helmet? And he said, got to get used to breathing through the mouthpiece again. He's getting close.
Okay. I hear what you're saying, and I think that these are important observations to have. I think Von Miller is legitimately the most optimistic and positive human on planet Earth.
Probably right, yes.
I think the Bills are going to put him on the PUP list to start the season to protect him from himself. Because I think right now, Von is probably doing this to try and show them, like, guys, bring me back. Guys, I'm ready to go. Bring me back. This is the same guy that got injured and said, I think I can be back in a couple weeks, or I can be back by the playoffs. And then they were like, just kidding. You need surgery. You're not playing for a long time. I think he's trying to, like, let them see, like, okay, look, guys, like, I feel like I'm ready to go. And they're going to be like, hey, we appreciate that. We appreciate that you've hung out here for the entire offseason and you've helped with coaching up all of these guys. Thanks for doing that. We'll see you week 6 against the Giants, because we don't want your first game to be in London. We'll see you week 6 against the Giants. So I think that he'll start on the PUP. If he doesn't, I mean, at that point, like, he'll be back soon. Like, if he is not on the PUP list, you're not just, like, throwing away that roster spot with all of the difficult decisions you have to make. Like, you're not putting him on the PUP list, or you're not keeping him off the PUP list if you think there's only a chance he's back. You need to 100% know that this guy is playing, or else you're just putting him on the PUP and you're being overcautious and you're saying, okay, we'll stow him away for 4 weeks.
I agree with everything you said, essentially. I do think he'll wind up on the PUP list for all of those reasons you mentioned. The problem with, if you do, even if he's healthy and he says, I'm ready to go, and the doctors go, yeah, he's fine. Like, he can go out there and play. You're not going to go out there and have him play 90% of the snaps in week 1. I mean, the guy hasn't been a part of practice or anything. He's still ramping up, and it's week 1. But if he was on your active 53 and you said, let's put him on a pitch count and he's going to play 30% of the snaps, what happens then if someone like Greg Rousseau or Leonard Floyd rolls an ankle? He's got to now play, and you don't want him to play. You can't put yourself in that position either. You can't paint yourself into a corner. What they could do, because I want to remind everybody this. If he's on PUP, Matt, he can't practice either. So if he's on PUP, he can't even practice for 4 weeks. Now you're looking at, like you said, which I'm fine with, he can't even practice until the start of week 5. Then let him practice and play in week 6. But if one of the options is here, you keep him on the 53. You don't play him because you can't for 4 weeks. But you keep him on the 53. You don't play him because you don't want him out there yet. You just make him inactive for game day until he's ready. That way he can practice as much as you want until he's ready.
Yeah.
Because he can't practice on PUP.
You're right, but are you really doing that second scenario for him to come back week 3 or week 4 as opposed to week 5 or week 6? Like, is it worth it to just lose the potential roster spot of a Kingsley Jonathan or something, just to have him around for the first month of the season? And who knows, maybe he flashes and he ends up, you have a more difficult decision in a different position. I don't know. I just think, given Von Miller's age, given all of the things he's done in the league, the injury that he's coming off of, they are going to be so overcautious about this. Like, even if a doctor is telling them, hey, like, we think he's probably fine, or they're not going to say probably, he's good to go. They might be like, yeah, he's good to go, but let's just really make sure.
Yeah. Look, I'm just throwing out the other scenarios. I pretty much agree with everything you're saying about what's going to happen and what should happen. I think most Bills fans agree they shouldn't, put him on the field. It's a marathon, not a sprint. I've said it many times. I think the Bills understand and know they want to be playing their best football and be the healthy as they can be, later in the season, in December, January, and February. What if they didn't have Leonard Floyd? Would you feel the same? What if they never signed Leonard Floyd?
Yes, I would feel the same because it is, once again, you have to look at everything big picture and you have to look at 17 games and not just 4 games, 5 games. So I think you would feel confident enough about the rest of your roster that you would be able to get through that point. I think with or without Von Miller, your baseline the first 4 games of the season, like it should be 3-1. Like that should be your goal. That it has to be 3-1. And if you have Von Miller, sure you could win all 4, but that should be your bottom. And same thing without him. Like that shouldn't change. So that's why I think you just be overcautious and you bring him back when you need to bring him back.
All right, let's just bounce around the league here for a second. I got a couple of topics I want to discuss with you. Number one is what's happening in San Francisco with their quarterback situation. Brock Purdy had that UCL injury. He is back. He is playing, but they had decided a while ago that he was going to be their starter, which to me tells me all I need to know about what they thought about Trey Lance. And now Trey Lance isn't even the number 2. It's Sam Darnold. They announced that. So it looks like they're going to move on and trade Trey Lance. That's a really, I'll say, I think it's one of the worst trades in NFL history for the San Francisco 49ers to give up what they gave up. Matt, they swapped first round picks, gave up 2 more first round picks and a third round pick to get Trey Lance, who's played 8 games for them, started like 2 or 4 in garbage time. And then, last year before he got hurt for a couple, and they're going to move on from him already. I think this is stunning.
Bogey Basham and a third round pick for Trey Lance. Do you do it?
No, I don't think the Bills need to bring Trey Lance. I don't know. I'd have to know what the Bills felt about Trey Lance. I guess so. Yeah. You know what? I think I would because I like Trey Lance. I like his physical tools, and he reminds me a lot of Josh Allen with those.
That's what I mean. I mean, I know that the 49ers messed up big time with all that they gave up for him, but to write somebody off that quick, I mean, don't you just love the skill set that he has? I think you would feel really comfortable about your backup quarterback position for the next couple of years, and he's still an asset. Like, I don't think that if you trade for him, he has no value. I know that Diana Rossini, who's now with The Athletic, reported that they have been shopping him for a while, and they haven't gotten any offers for him. But, you're sitting there, and you're like, okay, like, we don't know if Boogie Basham is going to even make this team. We'll give you him and we'll give you a third. And the reason we can give you the third is because we know we're getting a compensatory pick. So we're getting a third round pick back anyway. So in the end of the day, like, does it really, really take that much away for us? I just think like nothing that has been. Matt Barkley had a strong preseason game against the Colts. Kyle Allen had a strong preseason game against the Steelers, but nothing from either of those guys all summer has made me think like, okay, this is as good of a backup option as you have behind Josh Allen. And the way that he plays, like, you just probably want to have a little bit more peace of mind there at your backup quarterback spot. And, like sitting here from our perspective going, well, Matt, why would you trade something for a guy who's going to be the third quarterback in San Francisco? Well, my counterpoint is like, I like Sam Darnold a lot. Like, I think Sam Darnold could probably start on a lot of teams in this league. And then as far as Purdy's concerned, they were awesome with him last year. That doesn't mean he was awesome, but you're not going to just take the guy's job away after what he did last season. So it was almost an impossible situation for Lance anyway. So yeah, I would be making that call if I'm Brandon Beane. The problem is I don't think San Francisco will cut bait for that little, given what they paid.
We should first mention Matt Barkley's been dealing with an elbow injury. So right now the Bills only have 2 healthy quarterbacks on their roster heading into Saturday. But by then, maybe Matt Barkley's able to play. Let's see how that plays out for Saturday. But they didn't sign a quarterback or even bring one in that I know of. So it looks like Matt Barkley should be fine overall. As far as the situation with San Francisco, when all this was happening, I'm like, man, they must really, really love Brock Purdy. Now it looks like, no, they just really don't like Trey Lance because not only did he not start or even get a chance to start, he's the number 3. He's behind Sam Darnold, who beat him out. And I agree with you. I don't hate Sam Darnold either. I think that he's a quality backup to have in this league and could start on some teams in the NFL. What about Jonathan Taylor? There's been a lot of Bills fans who've said that they should at least investigate Jonathan Taylor. I'm not of that mind. I think that what it would take to get him, plus to be able to pay him, no way am I interested in that. And even if you could bring him in just on the salary he has, I don't know if I want to do that for the Bills for the asset. If you want to give him to the Bills for free for his $4.5 million salary, fine, go ahead. He's a fantastic player. I like James Cook. I'm not telling you James Cook is better than Jonathan Taylor. What I'm telling you is for the assets you have to give up for what a running back means to this offense, it's not worth it to me.
That's what I think. I think it's almost the same thing we said about Dalvin Cook going to the Jets. And I think it's the same thing about, well, it's different with Zeke over in New England, but the Bills bread and butter, their identity should be passing the football. That does not mean that they should abandon the run completely. You've probably seen talking heads on TV or on radio for years talking about one of the reasons why the Bills can't get over the hump is because they can't establish the run. I think that's a bunch of nonsense. I think it's a lot of reasons why they can't get over the hump, but that's not the main reason why. So yeah, I mean, good football players make good football teams better. That's obvious. Jonathan Taylor comes in the door. The Bills are a better team and they have a better chance of winning the Super Bowl this year than they do without him. But knowing what it's going to cost to get him, and more importantly, what it's going to cost to have him under contract for a significant period of time.
Because otherwise he's a rental anyway. And I understand they're trying to win a Super Bowl, and that's okay to have a rental, but the premium asset you'd be giving up for a guy like that, on a team that's going to be so pass heavy anyway.
Here's an interesting one, okay? And this is tricky. I don't think I say yes to this. If you are really interested in Jonathan Taylor, would you trade James Cook for Jonathan Taylor straight up?
Well,
so
would I rather have Jonathan Taylor than James Cook? Probably, because of how good he is.
It's you're going all in on this year.
Taylor.
No, I agree. It would almost be like,
would I trade him straight up? I don't think so, because I'm left with nothing next year.
I understand that, but you've got assets, and who knows what happens, and maybe your mind changes because of what he does. I'm not disagreeing with you, because you have James Cook on cost control for the next 3 years, and I think that's what you need to do with running backs, and I like James Cook's upside. But I'm just thinking that's like the bare minimum you would probably be away with giving the Colts. I mean, they're asking for a first-round pick. I don't think they're getting a first-round pick from anybody, and if they do, I think the team that's giving them the first-round pick is not using their assets properly. So, okay, then you go to, okay, well, what about second-round picks? Well, James Cook was a second-round pick last year. He's the same position. You know, he checks a box for the Colts of like, okay, here you've got somebody who's cheap for the next several years at running back with upside. And for the Bills, it's like, okay, now you fall into this window of, I think it was Louis Riddick was on ESPN, and he was like, Jonathan Taylor on the Buffalo Bills makes them the favorite to win the Super Bowl. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was Sal Palantonio. It was one of them on their Get Up program in the morning. And I'm like, okay, but I kind of think they're in that conversation anyway without him. And it's not just a one-year thing. You need to think long-term here, because Josh Allen makes a significant amount of money. But it's interesting. It's interesting.
I do think he would fit and help a lot better the Miami Dolphins. I don't want to see that happen for the Bills' sake. Mm-hmm. But you add him to the Dolphins, I think that's a really interesting move for them that really elevates them even more, because to me, the running back room isn't spectacular, and they had a lot of problems running the ball last year. Some of that's, a big part of that's their offensive line. But I think that's the kind of move that team needs.
I don't disagree with you, but then I wonder, like, how many times can you get rid of high picks and assets when you have this major question mark about your quarterback's health? Mm-hmm. If you knew Tua was going to be healthy for the next 8-9 years, you're probably a little bit more comfortable making that move. But what if you need a quarterback? What if Tua said that he thought about retiring. I don't ever want to see a player have to get to that point, but if your quarterback was thinking about retiring even for a second, I don't think you can just plan around that guy for the next decade. And you already traded a first-round pick for Bradley Chubb. You traded a pick for Jalen Ramsey. You had a first-round pick taken away because of all the stuff that happened with the owner. Like, I don't know. Eventually, you need to use a first-round pick.
By the way, speaking of retiring, how about Corey Davis retiring? I loved that guy when he came out of college. I was like a huge Corey Davis fan when he came out of college, Western Michigan. I'm like, oh my God, that'd be great on the Bills. And I was wrong on that. Didn't turn out very well. Titans, Jets, now he's going to retire. So he made it known today he's going to retire. Matt, before we leave, unfortunately, we started with the passing of your grandfather. And I want to end with the passing of Rick Jeanneret. You know, he means a lot to so many people here in Western New York. And you know, I told the story on the radio when it happened that Friday morning when I went on, just to give you an idea. When I found out Thursday night, I called my mom, who's 72, and the next morning I told my son, who's 9, who both needed to know because that's how much he spanned all of our lives and generations. There's going to be a nice memorial and tribute to him, I should say, on Sunday down at KeyBank Center downtown. In case anybody hasn't seen that, you can check that out. The Sabres have tweeted out about it and talked about it. But, you know, when I was growing up, it was the voices, Irv and Rick and Tom on your station, of course, legendary. Van Miller, John Murphy, but atop the mountain was Rick Jenneret and always will be an indelible voice in my head. And he is a very, very big reason why people like you and I do this for a living.
He was my hero growing up. I mean, I idolized Rick Jenneret, and I know that probably is silly for some people to hear. And you're like, okay, well, he was a hockey announcer, but when you are a kid and hockey's your favorite sport and you live in a city like Buffalo, like I never thought I was going to be one of the players on the ice. I always wanted to do something like Rick Jenneret. And my mom tells me stories of me standing on the fireplace and trying to like imitate Rick Jenneret. He scores and doing it for, all those years when I was a little kid. When I think of the Sabres, I think of that voice. I think of those moments, and he elevated those moments. Like all of my favorite memories of the Sabres as a child, all of my favorite memories watching games with my dad and with my grandfather, like people who I have lost recently, he was the voice in the background. And I think it makes those moments and those memories just a little bit more special. And I know a lot of people feel the same way. I think when you think of your favorite Sabres moment, for a lot of people, he's the voice behind that. And I think that's one of the reasons why he was so special to so many people. So, an unbelievable career, an awesome person who I was very fortunate to get, the chance to meet and interact with several times over the course of my 10-year career working at Channel 7. And he'll be missed. He will certainly be missed.
No doubt about it. And we extend all of our condolences and thoughts to Rick Jenneret's family, friends, the entire Western New York community, the hockey world, losing a legend in Rick Jenneret.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
This is not a death, okay? Like I want to make that very clear. But you mentioned Irv, Rick, and Tom, and it made me think of something. Mike Randall has worked at Channel 7 for years. On Thursday, he is retiring. So this podcast will be out. That is Mike Randall's final day working at Channel 7. 40 years at Channel 7.
I love it.
Legitimately one of the most talented people that has ever worked in Buffalo broadcasting. In any medium, any platform, Mike Randall is also a legend and deserves to be recognized. And I know this is a sports podcast. Some people will know who Mike Randall is. Others will not. But hey, if you do something for 40 years and you're really, really good at it, you deserve a little bit of shine. And I've always really enjoyed Mike Randall as a colleague and as a friend. So kudos to you. Shout out. Enjoy retirement. You have earned it.
Amazing. Love it. Congratulations, Mike Randall. Great place to end this particular podcast. Don't forget, we are always on video. If you're listening to us, you want to see our faces, you can do that. Go to the YouTube page at Sal Sports. We're getting some great numbers there. A lot of great feedback on that. Thank you very much. Thank you to Mike Robier, our producer here today, not only obviously on the video side, but on the audio side as well. That's where you can always find It's Always Game Day in Buffalo, iTunes, Spotify. We'd appreciate you subscribing and throwing us a nice review, 5-star rating, a big like, all those kinds of things that you do on social media. All right, Matt, on to Chicago, and then it's on to the regular season, buddy.